Welcome to the Scale the Chaos podcast, where we talk all things contributing to your organization's chaos and dysfunction. I'm Rhonda Lee, founder and owner of Scale the Chaos. My guest today is Maureen Zappala, a former NASA engineer. Yes, she is actually a rocket scientist, having managed NASA's full-scale altitude simulation jet engine research test facility. She has become one of the leading experts on imposter syndrome and is the author of the book Pushing Your Envelope: How Smart People Defeat Self-Doubt and Live with Bold Enthusiasm. She's also excited to be releasing her next book for leaders before the end of the month. Welcome, Maureen. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Oh, me too, Rhonda. I'm so just overjoyed and delighted. So, yeah, this is going to be fun.
The subject of imposter syndrome, it's an interesting subject. And before you and I met, I had heard the term thrown around, but hadn't paid much attention to it until I heard you speak about it. And I immediately thought, this is me. I totally related to it. So it's a very needed subject because I believe so many of us these days are experiencing imposter syndrome on various levels. So tell us about your brief journey into becoming an expert on imposter syndrome.
Before I give you the story of my journey, I will say you're not alone. I can't
Yeah.
tell you how many people say that to me. I really wasn't sure what it was until you explained it. And then I thought that's me.
Hmm.
So, yeah, it's more common than we think,
Yes.
but there is a solution and a way to maneuver through it.
And that's
So
a
yeah,
relief.
my journey into imposter syndrome is so I was a rocket scientist at NASA. Although
Hmm.
I worked in aircraft propulsion, not rocket propulsion, doesn't matter. Thermodynamically, they're exactly the same.
Yes.
So I can legitimately say
Say
rocket
you're,
scientist.
yeah.
And every day I walked into work thinking, what did someone make a mistake hiring me? Really? Did they really think I'm qualified? They must have because they kept paying me.
Hmm.
But yes, it's a chronic self-doubt, and that makes qualified people feel not qualified. And it's a thought distortion. I didn't know what it was. I really didn't. I just thought any day they're going to find out that I don't belong here and they're going to boot me out the front door of the gate. It never happened. I left after probably 14 or 15 years just to do other things. Nothing
Hmm.
happened, nothing bad. Raised a few kids, a couple of kids, and then was doing, I taught a lot of junior high girls Sunday school classes and found that I have a skill for keeping a very tough audience
Uh-huh.
engaged. 10-year
Yes.
old girls.
Yes.
So I translated those skills to adults and I wanted to speak on leadership because I was led by extraordinary leaders at NASA. But there's a million leadership speakers. So I
Hmm.
thought, how can I set myself apart in the paid professional speaking world? Stumbled onto a book that talked about imposter syndrome,
Hmm.
and that was it. This is what I was put on earth to talk about. The book was written by a woman named Valerie Young, and it's called Secret Thoughts of Successful Women. Although imposter syndrome hits women and men, actually, she's retitled the book, Secret Thoughts of Successful Women and Men,
Hmm.
because it hits men.
Yeah.
But reading that book illuminated what I thought was a character flaw instead of a thought process distortion. Huge
Yes.
difference.
Oh, yes.
I wasn't broken, my thinking was. I dove into the topic, did my own research, talked with a million people, maybe not a million. As an engineer, I shouldn't exaggerate. I talked with a
Mhm.
lot of people
Yeah.
and have developed my content, my programs to help people overcome the same distorted thought process that I had. And it's called imposter syndrome.
So, for our listeners who are unfamiliar with the term, possibly similar to how I was before you and I met, how exactly do you define imposter syndrome?
If you Google the phrase, you'll find a half a dozen or a dozen different ways of wording it, but it's essentially the same. It's an inability or an unwillingness to internalize your success, your qualifications, your competence, and instead you externalize it. You attribute it to things like luck or timing, or in my case, back when I got hired at NASA, NASA just needed more women. So I was just picked because I was a woman.
Yeah.
Part of that is true. They definitely needed women. I bubbled to the top, though, with my credentials. So imposter syndrome is not realizing that you're qualified
Hmm.
and instead not just only attributing it to outside things, but thinking it's like I'm committing this massive fraud. I
Yes.
feel like I'm not qualified to be here. and they are any minute going to figure it out, and I'm going to be out on my butt.
Mhm.
And that causes anxiety,
Mhm.
questioning your decisions, looking over your shoulder, who's watching, do I measure up, do I belong here? So it spirals into this sometimes very complicated set of it's not even a lack of confidence. I call it a limit of confidence, but it mimics a lack of
I like that.
confidence.
So we already mentioned that it's common. Are there any statistics to quantify how common imposter syndrome is in the workplace?
Yeah, there's both broad and very niche channeled specific industry type
Okay.
studies. To say there's one number, it's hard to say. The broad studies say 75 to 80%. It's higher in certain countries, it's higher in certain industries, it's higher at certain levels of an organization. I've seen studies that say 85% of C-level executives
Okay.
struggle with it. It's huge.
Yeah. And that's across, I'm assuming, most industries,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Are there any industries in particular that it more prevalent in?
Yeah, there is. I'm from the STEM background, science,
Okay.
technology, engineering, and math. It hits those folks real hard. It hits people in the creative fields,
Okay.
performing arts, photography, graphic design, art, any kind of artistic type of endeavor. It hits people in competitive fields, competitive meaning of a company that tends to reward outcome versus effort, like top salesman
Uh-huh.
or biggest revenue generator kind of thing. So it's that kind of
Right.
makes that competitive thing.
Because you can only have one top salesperson,
Yeah.
right? And one top revenue generator, right? I have worked in organizations where I have had leaders where they're like, this is the best thing because it generates the best performance, but it also can create this imposter syndrome, this culture of imposter syndrome.
And not just for the people that aren't number one, but for the people who are, because they think I did it in 1 year. Can I do it the next year?
Oh,
And what
yeah.
happens if I don't do it year after year? And you start to feel like, oh, I guess it was a fluke,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. It hits people in medicine, law, accounting, financial services, anything where there's credentials required and
Okay.
ongoing certification, because
Uh-huh.
you have to prove yourself all the time.
Yes.
So it hits a lot of industries.
So it's pretty widespread. So let's talk about how it affects the individual performance in the job setting.
Yeah, that's a great question because it does have an individual effect
Hmm.
as well as a corporate effect, an organizational effect. But on the personal side, it just makes you feel stupid.
Yeah.
I feel pressured to perform, to contribute, to measure up.
Hmm.
It tends to cause you to exhibit coping mechanisms that are counterproductive, actually. They help alleviate the fear of being found as a fraud, but they also prevent you from being found as a fraud because they turn you into a rock star. So
Hmm.
you'll see it in people that over prepare or they procrastinate, two ends of the spectrum.
Uh-huh.
They may self sabotage either in a really dramatic way, addiction or
Uh-huh.
substance abuse, or they could self sabotage in things like chronic lateness, being ridiculously disorganized. I'll confess to that right now.
Yeah.
So it manifests itself in a lot of ways. To its extreme, boy, if you're just can you imagine living with that kind of anxiety day after day, month after month?
Yeah.
Not only can you not enjoy the career that you've chosen,
Hmm.
but you are exhausted
Yes.
from the treadmill,
Yeah.
running on the hamster wheel. So at its extreme, it causes lost time, employee
Yes.
turnover, employee dissatisfaction, great people holding back great ideas
Hmm.
because they're afraid of being judged. So
Yeah.
on a personal level, it's very defeating.
Yeah, I can see it on a spectrum, it being on one hand being very demotivating, right? I'm not going to do a good job anyways, why try? But then on the other spectrum, because most of us work in such a competitive environment, right? That you get on that hamster wheel, and that's where that burnout starts
Yeah.
hitting.
And also too, and I'm sure you feel it too, Rhonda, because we're in similar kind of businesses.
Hmm.
We're dealing with clients and
Hmm.
they have problems. They've hired us to solve them. You say to yourself, Rhonda, you did a great job with the last client. I don't think you're going to do as well with this client.
Yeah.
And so there's no legitimate reason for you to believe it other than, I don't know, can I?
Yeah.
And because it's the work is so unscripted,
Hmm.
unchoreographed, unpredictable that imposter syndrome always screams the loudest in times of change.
Yes.
So if you change careers, industries, or guess what? Today's Monday, tomorrow's Tuesday. So
Yeah.
it could be
Right.
that kind of change.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Especially in our industry where maybe we did a great job with the previous client, but
Yep.
then there's always the competition for the next client, right?
Sure.
To
Oh,
be the
yeah.
best
Yep.
because there can only be one top salesperson, one top revenue generator. Most companies who hire people like us are only hiring one person, right?
Right.
So we
Right.
have to be the top person. We have to be the person that they hire.
Right.
Of course, then we also have to have faith in the fact that there's enough business to go around,
Right.
right?
And in addition to that, we have to really be careful of the story we tell ourselves, whether we get the engagement or not.
Uh-huh.
The story that we tell ourselves when we get it is often, oh, it's just because they liked me
Uh-huh.
personally. I made them
Yeah.
laugh, or they were running out of time and I just showed up at the right time at the right place.
Yes.
And if we don't get the engagement, we tell ourselves a story of, I'm terrible, I'm
Yes.
awful. What can I do to change? Whereas none of that is likely true. It's just some of it could be. Sure.
Yeah.
People want to do business with people they like.
Yes.
It's good to be likable.
And there's always room for improvement, right?
There absolutely is. But why not just simply say, wow, they liked me enough, they loved me enough, they saw value in what I have to offer enough to hire me. I'm going to
Uh-huh.
bring my best, and they can't do what I do, just like I can't do what they do. So
Correct.
why not just say, I'm going to bring you my very best solutions? It's up to you to use them, but confidence tells me past experience, past clients, past results tell me my content, my strategy, my proposals
Uh-huh.
will work to help solve your problem.
We've talked about some of the common behaviors and thought patterns associated with it. And I know in one of our previous conversations, you said imposter syndrome is not a superpower. And oftentimes, a lot of people treat it as a superpower. Tell me a little bit more about what you are seeing as you talk to people about imposter syndrome and how they might be misinterpreting it as a superpower.
Oh, yeah, I tell you, that's a pet peeve of mine because to say that it's a superpower implies a couple of things.
Uh-huh.
It implies that having it is what you need to succeed.
Yes.
Not true. It implies that only a few select people will
Uh-huh.
succeed if they have it or if they admit to it. And another thing is it really releases a person, illegitimately releases a person from doing the required work to really get through it. So in other
Uh-huh.
words, oh, well, it's my superpower. I'm going to stay there because I need it to progress or succeed. And my thinking is, no, you don't. You acknowledge it, but you do not let it define you because you will be successful in spite of imposter syndrome. But when you overcome imposter syndrome, you won't have that other self-talk limiting you.
It'll
So
be
it's not your
less
superpower.
exhausting.
Yeah, it way less exhausting. You'll be able to really enjoy not just the process of your work, but the product, the end results.
Hmm.
Because people with imposter syndrome don't. They always think could have been better, or if I only had more people, I would have done it faster, or saved more money, or had more.
Yeah.
No, just say it's good.
So let's talk about how does imposter syndrome contribute to organizational chaos and dysfunction?
It contributes to it in a very underhanded, almost undetected way, because people with imposter syndrome appear to be the rock stars.
Hmm.
So management and leaders and supervisors tend to think they're good.
Yeah.
I don't need to worry about them, but they don't know that inside the mind and heart of that person is a person like frantically
Yeah.
trying to do
Right.
the work and do it all and do it fast. And they're sacrificing time at home. It's the cause of burnout. It's the cause of great thoughts and ideas being
Hmm.
held back because somebody is like, oh, I don't know. am I qualified to even contribute to the conversation? Or what if they think it's stupid? Or, oh, I don't want to get that promotion because my team won't like me anymore. It's just crazy
Oh,
stuff that
yeah.
goes on, crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But it
And
holds great people back. And the
oh,
title, in fact, the title of my newest book that's coming out the end of this month, it's a mouthful, but
okay.
it's like it needs to be a mouthful.
Yeah.
It's called, and it's for leaders of teams and individuals that have imposter syndrome,
Okay.
teaches them how to recognize the symptoms. It's called Get Your Best People to Give Their Best Work. I know it's a mouthful, but it makes sense because you look at these folks not knowing they have more to give, more to
Yes.
offer. Not that you want to extract more from them, but you want to release them
Yes.
from the mind garbage.
Yeah. When you say they have more to give, it's not in terms of they have more time to give to you. It's they have more to give if they're able to release these mindsets. Correct.
Yes.
And really,
Yes.
you were talking about reduced productivity, which always translates into reduced revenue,
Yep.
all that kind of thing, as far as an organizational ability to scale effectively.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Because the people that procrastinate, if procrastinating is one of their coping mechanisms, they've got this much work to do. They're doing
uh-huh.
it crammed into an amount of
Yeah.
time. There's no way that's their best work.
Yes.
No
Even
way.
those who claim that they work best under pressure, really, that's just their way of getting the work done, not necessarily doing it in the best.
Yeah, because then when the project is done, and let's say that it didn't hit the mark,
Uh-huh.
they could say, it was my own fault. I just didn't put in the time and effort. Well, why didn't you go into it thinking like that? We're going to
Yeah.
change that thinking.
Yeah. So we talked about how it manifests on an individual performance level. Let's talk about because you mentioned earlier it's really common in C-suite. So how does it manifest itself in leadership roles?
There's a chapter in my book about C-level exec. I did some little bit of research on C-level executives. It's very closely tied to the whole field of mindset, closed mindset versus growth
Yes.
mindset. It'll manifest itself in it comes from the higher you go in an organization, the less likely you are to have peers that you can
Uh-huh.
bounce ideas off of. So it tends to set yourself up to be very
Yeah.
isolated.
They
So
say
that's
it's lonely at the top. Yeah.
and in
Yeah.
many ways,
Yes,
it's
it
so
is.
many ways. And if you are promoted to a higher level, now you're looking below thinking, what will they think of me? I
Uh-huh.
don't know. Why did they do it? So there's that relational issue, just even with the peers that you're familiar with. Um, and then if you've got a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, growth mindset says we want to be open to everything, which is good, great.
Yeah.
However, if you are a person that is distracted by shiny objects,
Uh-huh.
which seems like a growth mindset, you're not able to keep things focused.
Yeah.
On the flip side, if you are a fixed mindset, meaning we can't really learn anything new, we're not going to change anything new, and I'm only going to reward outcome, not effort.
Uh-huh.
That's where you start setting yourself up for, like what we talked about before, the top salesperson, though, the one carrot that everybody is trying to reach for.
Yeah.
And it can sometimes turn into a very toxic culture.
So when you say we want to reward effort, how do we distinguish it from the culture, though, where everybody wins a participation trophy?
Oh, yeah.
Where's the balance between those two?
That's a great question. You know, a CEO, their job is to set the vision, right? Set the
Yes.
vision
Uh-huh.
and put the right people in place to
Yes.
actually tactically make it happen.
Uh-huh.
Process and outcome, there should be process goals for sure.
Yes.
Process activities, process goals. And the process could look like an outcome goal, but
Uh-huh.
they're like milestones along the way.
Yes. Yes.
And so how do you reward that? How do you reward team activities? How do you reward?
Yeah. So basically making sure everybody has their own individual goals.
Yeah.
And then in addition to rewarding those who are the top revenue, top sales, whatever it is, also rewarding on the basis of individual goal completion.
Yeah. And I think too, it also comes down to understanding really what drives your people. If
Yeah.
I've, even when I worked at NASA, I was not goal oriented. I
Uh-huh.
was not excited by being rewarded for the goal.
Uh-huh.
I was definitely a process person
Yeah.
what, how can I gather my team? How can I get them going? How can I get them excited? The money, the outcome of a medal or something
Yeah.
didn't excite me, but knowing that I built rich relationships and I was able to, turn a curmudgeon into a friend, like just
Yes.
those kinds
Yeah.
of process, but more process driven things. But
Yes.
some people are like competitive.
Mm-hmm.
There's a contest, I'm in it.
Yeah.
Have
And
a good mix, have a good mix of people, and have a good mix of things to incentivize them.
okay, thank you so much, Maureen. This has been a lot of fun. Be sure to check out part 2 of our discussion with Maureen in my next podcast episode. And listeners, be sure to check out Maureen's website at www.maureenz.com and follow her on LinkedIn. I'm assuming there's a link to your LinkedIn on your
Yeah,
website.
the best
Okay.
place to start with me is on my website. From there,
Okay.
you'll find me on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and
Okay.
YouTube.
And yeah, and I'll leave links to her LinkedIn and her website in the podcast description as well. And you can find her book, Pushing Your Envelope, on Amazon, and be on the lookout for her new book at the end of this month, which is November of 2024. So for more information on how you can scale the chaos in your organization, you can head on over to my website at www.scalethechaos.com. You can also find our other podcasts at scalethechaos.com/podcasts. I'm Rhonda Lee, and we will chat more next time.